Number 1. Sacagawea Hotel. Three Forks, 1910. The new Sacagawea Hotel opened across from the Milwaukee Railroad Depot, ready for travelers stepping off dusty trains. Its name honored the Shoshone guide tied to the Lewis and Clark journey and to the nearby headwaters of the Missouri. The town was growing around the rails, and the bright lobby felt grand. It welcomed ranchers, too. As decades passed, railroad crowds thinned, but the hotel kept its polished wood, tall windows, and old clocks. Staff began sharing a gentler kind of legend. They spoke of an early maid who never seemed to finish her rounds. Late at night, light footsteps crossed empty halls, paused near the stairs, then stopped beside closed doors. No one was there. The clocks became part of the mystery. Workers said certain antique faces began ticking, even when no one had wound them. A room might be left untidy, only to seem strangely neat later. Nothing was thrown or broken. The unseen helper appeared to follow the same quiet rules she may have known while caring for guests in life. No worker could explain it. Today, guests come for history, yet some leave listening more closely than before. When the lobby settles and the last voices fade, a measured step may pass beyond the stairway. Then an old clock answers with one faint, even tick. The hotel still does not feel threatened. It feels watched over, as if one loyal maid still keeps the Sacagawea ready for tomorrow. Number 2. Kempton Hotel. Terry, June 15th, 1902. The Kempton Hotel opened while homesteaders, ranchers, and railroad travelers were shaping eastern Montana. It survived hard winters, changing roads, and more than a century of guests, becoming known as the state's oldest continuously operated hotel. Its rooms still carry that long memory. Much of its early character still remains. Some of the saddest stories came early. Local lore says 2 children suffering from typhoid were brought to a doctor staying inside the hotel, but both died soon after arriving. Years later, visitors began hearing quick little footsteps in upstairs halls. A few saw small faces watching silently from the top floor windows. The sound often ends at dawn. The building also served its community during the 1918 influenza epidemic, when beds were needed wherever space could be found. One tale remembers a devoted nurse who cared for the sick until the illness took her too. Guests have described waking to a woman in white near the bed, smiling calmly before fading from view. Her visits feel protective. The Kemptons' legends are not told as warnings. They sound more like old duties continuing after the lamps are lowered. Number 3. Clark Chateau. Butte, 1898. Copper King William A. Clark built a 4-story mansion for his oldest son, Charles, and Charles's wife, Catherine. Architect William S. Aldrich shaped it after a French chateau the couple had admired abroad. Stone walls, stained glass, carved wood, and 7 fireplaces displayed Butte's mining wealth. The mansion made that power visible. The house later passed through several chapters of city life. Families lived there, musicians studied there, and community groups filled rooms once used for formal visits. The upper floors remembered dances and polished shoes. Even after the grand social years ended, people said the building never became completely quiet. New voices replaced the family's own. Employees and visitors sometimes hear piano notes drifting from a room where no one is playing. Others catch soft laughter above them, usually near the third floor, as though a gathering has started behind a closed door. The sounds are brief and warm, never sharp, and often vanish when someone climbs the stairs. Soon the upper rooms become silent. That is why the Clark Chateau feels less like an empty mansion than a house between events. Daylight reveals Butte's rich, proud past in every careful detail. Evening adds something harder to explain. One last chord, a ripple of laughter, then silence. For a moment, the old Copper King era seems close enough to hear through the walls. Number 4. Hotel Mead. Bannock, 1875. The large brick building now called Hotel Mead began as Beaverhead County's courthouse. When voters moved the county seat to Dillon in 1881, its rooms fell quiet. Dr. John Singleton Mead later bought the structure and turned it into a fine hotel, complete with a sweeping staircase. It became one of Bannock's finest frontier lodgings. The best-known legend arrived after a summer tragedy. In August 1916, 16-year-old Dorothy Dunn drowned in a dredge pond near Grasshopper Creek. Soon afterward, a close friend reportedly saw Dorothy's figure inside the hotel. The girl wore the same long blue dress remembered from before the accident. Her loss soon became part of the town's memory. Since then, visitors, especially children, have described a quiet young girl near the stairs or at a second-floor window. She does not rush toward anyone. She simply stands in the pale light, looking outside, then disappears when the witness looks again. Some also report cool spots and small sounds moving through empty rooms. Witnesses usually describe her as calm. Hotel Mead has held court records, travelers, minors, and years of silence. But Dorothy's story is the one people carry home. At dusk, the blue-gray windows reflect the abandoned street, and any shape behind the glass seems possible. The building stands silent. A girl in blue seems to remain inside. The old rooms keep her story alive after sunset. Number 5. Grand Street Theater. Helena, 1901. The stone building that now holds Grand Street Theater opened as a Unitarian church. Its minister, Leslie Willis Sprague, believed a church should also serve music, learning, and community life. The sloped floor and stage-like front later made the building a natural home for actors and audiences. The design already welcomed public gatherings. Clara Bicknell Hodgen, the minister's wife, became known for her kindness, especially toward Helena's children. After her death in 1905, the congregation honored her with a stained glass memorial window. Years later, the church became a library, and in 1976, it began a new life as Grand Street Theater. Her memorial later became the heart of the legend. Actors soon connected unusual moments to Clara. Backstage lights seemed to switch on without help. Equipment moved or hummed at odd times. Some performers felt a calm presence near the wings just before stepping on stage. The stories often returned to the restored window, glowing blue and gold above the room. No one finds a clear cause for the activity. No one tells Clara's legend as a dark one. She is remembered as an encouraging guest who stayed for the next generation of children. When the seat's empty and the stage goes black, the window still holds the final light. Somewhere behind the curtain, a board may creak softly, as if someone is still waiting to applaud. The final feeling is comfort, not fear. Number 6, Old Montana Prison. Deer Lodge, 1871. Montana Territory opened its first prison behind stone walls near the center of town. The first 9 inmates arrived that July, and the small cell house was crowded within weeks. Later, under Warden Frank Conley, prisoners helped build taller walls, workshops, and new cell blocks, slowly turning the site into a fortress of gray sandstone. For more than a century, iron doors opened and shut along narrow tiers. The prison survived cold winters, poor funding, and years when too many men were packed into too little space. Its darkest public chapter came in April 1959, when a riot placed the institution under inmate control for 36 hours. Afterward, Montana could no longer ignore its age. The old prison finally closed in September 1979, when the last inmates were moved west of Deer Lodge. Soon the empty complex became a museum, but guides and visitors began noticing sounds that did not fit the quiet. Keys seemed to jingle beyond locked gates. Heavy steps crossed upper walkways, and cold air moved through cells with no open window at night. Some noises may come from stone, pipes, or wind slipping through old bars. Yet, the timing keeps the legend alive. A clang answers after a tour has passed, or footsteps stop when someone turns toward them. The prison now holds displays instead of inmates, but after the gates settle, it can feel as though an unseen guard has begun one final round. Number 7, Paris Gibson Square Museum of Art. Great Falls, 1896. A massive sandstone school opened after years of planning slowed by the Panic of 1893. Architect William White designed the building, and local stone was hauled to the site by wagon. Its first class entered beneath a 4-faced clock tower, while thick walls and oak stairways made the new Central High School resemble a castle of learning. The tower was removed in 1916 because its weight pressed too heavily on the building. In 1917, janitor Frank Miles built living rooms for his wife and 5 children in the southeast attic, where they stayed for years. One daughter, tradition says, felt ashamed of living at school. She walked away early, then returned beside classmates as if arriving from home. The school became Paris Gibson Junior High in 1930 and closed in 1975. Volunteers reopened it as an art center in 1977, but the old halls did not lose every trace of childhood. Staff have reported small running steps where no class is meeting and soft singing near rooms once filled with music. A radio-like tune has also been heard from the basement. Guests may blame the boiler, settling floors, or sound traveling through the old stone building. Still, the stories often feel playful instead of frightening. A child seems to hurry around a corner, but the next hall is empty. The building now protects paintings and sculpture, while echoes of its first purpose continue between the quiet galleries. Number 8. University of Montana, Main Hall. Missoula, 1898. Workers raised University Hall from red brick and rough stone at the edge of a young campus. Local architect A.J. Gibson designed the Richardsonian Romanesque building, later called Main Hall. When the university opened in 1899, this grand structure faced the oval and announced that Missoula had become Montana's university city. Its clock tower soon became a campus symbol. In 1907, students even climbed it at night and stole the clock hands as a prank, despite efforts to guard the tower. Generations afterward studied, worked, and crossed the same stairways. With offices tucked under old roof lines, every closing door and floorboard carried easily after evening classes had ended. That natural chorus helped create a lasting campus legend. Custodians and students have spoken of soft footsteps above occupied floors, tapping from the attic, and doors clicking shut when no one is nearby. The reported presence is usually described as friendly, more curious than alarming, as though someone from the university's earliest years still checks all rooms. Main Hall has watched new buildings spread around it, while remaining as the oldest standing heart of campus. In daylight, its tower guides students across the oval. After dark, the upper windows become black squares above empty steps. Number 9. Bear Canyon Campground. East of Bozeman, Bear Canyon rises from the Gallatin Valley into forested mountain country. The area once formed part of the Fort Ellis Military Reserve, and farms, trails, and cabins later appeared along its lower slopes. Today, campers come for pine air and views, but after sunset, the canyon becomes a world of dark timber, moving creek water, and distant wind. Local folklore tells of a little girl in a white dress who appears near Bear Canyon Road, wooded trails, or the campground. She is usually seen at the edge of a light, never standing there for long. Some witnesses say she looks toward them as if asking for help. When they move closer, she turns between the trees and disappears without making a sound. No known record clearly identifies the child, which has allowed the legend to change with each telling. In gentler versions, she is simply lost and repeats the last walk she ever made. Other stories warn campers not to follow her too far from the road. A pale dress can be mistaken for mist or aspen bark, but that does not explain every reported figure. The canyon offers many ordinary reasons for unease. Animals step beyond the firelight, branches resemble arms, and moonlight shifts as clouds pass. Yet the story returns because the same image keeps appearing, a small child waiting where no child should be alone. Number 10. Dumas Hotel. Butte, 1890. French-Canadian brothers. Joseph and Arthur Nadeau opened an ornate brick house on East Mercury Street and named it the Dumas for Joseph's wife, Delia Dumas Nadeau. It stood at the entrance to Butte's red light district, serving miners and travelers during the copper boom. Parlors filled the upper floors, while smaller rooms lined the basement. The Dumas remained open through reform campaigns, wartime orders, and changing owners, often operating under the safer name of a hotel or boarding house. Eleanor Knott managed it from 1950 until February 1955. According to local history, she packed a suitcase and planned to leave Butte with a man she loved. He never arrived, and she was found dead the next morning. Years later, an employee working alone saw a woman in a hat carrying a suitcase past the upstairs bathroom. The figure descended the stairs, but both outside doors were locked and barred. Other visitors have described soft steps on the balcony, a calm scent like lavender, or a woman moving down the staircase before fading near the bottom. The business finally closed in 1982, ending 92 years of operation. But Eleanor's unfinished departure became the building's strongest legend. The suitcase makes the story feel less like a haunting than a journey delayed. Number 11. Garnet Ghost Town. Garnet Mountains, 1890s. Gold drew miners into a remote valley east of Missoula, where cabins soon became a busy town. By 1898, nearly 1,000 people lived in Garnet, supported by stores, one school, a hotel, and more than a dozen saloons. The Wells Hotel offered beds and meals above the rough camps below. Its builders expected the boom to endure. The boom could not last, or became harder to reach. Families moved away, and 1912 fire damaged the business district. Mining returned during the Great Depression, but by the 1940s, only a few residents remained. Snow and isolation protected many buildings from later development, leaving rooms, counters, and worn stairs behind. The rush had faded too. Winter gave Garnet its ghostly reputation. When roads disappear under snow and no staff remain overnight, visitors have reported piano notes, laughter, and glasses clinking near Kelly's saloon. Others say low conversation seems to drift around the Wells Hotel, as though miners have gathered after another shift beneath the frozen ground. Some also hear boots. Rangers note that wind, timber, and an empty town can produce convincing sounds, and some who know Garnet well have never seen a ghost. Even so, the setting keeps the legend alive. When darkness covers the street, the hotel windows face silent buildings, while music seems almost ready to begin behind one locked saloon door, playing for a vanished crowd. Number 12. The Lobby Bar and Davenport Hotel. Great Falls, 1914. Businessman J. G. Anthony built the Davenport Hotel above a street-level bar at 518 Central Avenue. The upper rooms served travelers in a growing railroad city, while the ground floor changed names and owners. During Prohibition, later stories linked the property to secret drinks, gambling, and the city's red light trade. Trains came. Local legend says the upper floors once operated as a brothel and that several women died during a fire on a busy night. Firm records for that tragedy are difficult to find, but the tale remains part of the building. No list remains. People passing outside have reported a cowboy in a wide hat watching Central Avenue from a second-floor window, then vanishing. The bar's best-known owner was C.J. Peterson, who called it the Jockey Club. Art Deco ponies decorated the walls, jazz filled the room, and martinis crossed the polished counter. Peterson favored pinstriped suits and a fedora. Years after his death, A photograph reportedly captured his familiar reflection in the mirrored back bar. It suited him. Other incidents feel less like old rumor. Security video has shown a cabinet opening and vodka bottles rolling out, with one stopping suddenly, as though caught. Number 13. Carroll College, St. Charles Hall. Helena, 1909. Bishop John Patrick Carroll's plan for a Catholic college took shape on a high hill above the capital city. President William Howard Taft helped lay the cornerstone of St. Charles Hall, the first great building of Mount St. Charles College. Taft predicted the school would bless Helena and Montana, while work continued around the stone. The college opened as an all-male school, preparing students for the priesthood and careers in law, medicine, teaching, and engineering. St. Charles held classrooms, a chapel, dining space, and dormitory rooms together under one roof. Later, wings enlarged it, but the upper floors kept the close hallways and heavy doors remembered by generations of students. Campus folklore centers on the fourth-floor dormitory. Students studying or working late have described scratching behind walls, slow scraping across empty rooms, and lights that flicker after bulbs were checked. Footsteps sometimes seem to follow along the corridor, stopping when a door opens. The reports vary, and no single event explains every version. Old heating pipes, settling wood, and tired students offer sensible answers, yet the story survives because St. Charles never fully sleeps. Each new class hears what earlier residents heard. After midnight, the old historic hall becomes still, and one faint scrape travels above the stairs, as though someone has resumed a lesson left unfinished long ago. Number 14. Belton Chalet. West Glacier, 1910. Only months after Glacier National Park was created, the Great Northern Railway opened Belton Chalet near the park's western entrance. Built in the Swiss style promoted by railroad president Lewis W. Hill, it stood within walking distance of the depot. For many visitors arriving by train, Belton was their first doorway into the park. The chalet was the first in the railway's network of lodges and backcountry stops. During Glacier's early years, it also served as the seasonal headquarters of the park superintendent. Early guests ate, rested, and planned horseback journeys from its timbered rooms before roads made mountain travel easier. Railway workers kept the gateway moving. The property later passed through quieter decades and was sold by the railroad in 1946. After years of limited use, a careful major restoration began in the late 1990s and returned the complex to hotel life. Staff and guests then shared stories of doors closing gently, measured footsteps crossing wooden halls, and figures dressed like early workers or rangers. The reports usually carry no warning. The unseen visitors seem to follow old routines, checking an entrance, crossing the lobby, or pausing near arriving guests. When a train sounds beyond the trees, Belton Chalet can feel like the gateway it was in 1910. For a moment, someone from that first summer may still be quietly waiting beside the door, even now. Number 15. Bonanza Inn. Virginia City, mid-1860s. The building, later called the Bonanza Inn, first served as the Madison County Courthouse during the famous Alder Gulch Gold Rush. After the county seat moved, 3 Sisters of Charity arrived from Leavenworth, Kansas in 1876. They converted the former courthouse into St. Mary's Hospital for miners and local families. The sisters treated illness, mining injuries, and wounds from saloon fights in a town many miles from large medical centers. Among them was young Sister Irene, remembered for caring closely for patients. The hospital lasted only a few years as mining declined, and the sisters departed in 1879. The building later became lodging known as the Bonanza Inn. Across several generations, Virginia City residents reported a woman in a long black religious robe moving along the street or keeping watch near sickbeds. Historian Ellen Baumler connected the figure with Sister Irene. Guests in room 1 have also told of waking as blankets were carefully pulled into place, though no living person had entered the room. Yet nothing in the story suggests anger. The figure behaves as a nurse might during one more quiet round, offering comfort before disappearing. Outside, Virginia City's wooden walks grow empty beneath the quiet, dark hills. Inside the old courthouse and hospital, a blanket may shift softly. Number 16. Missoula Mercantile. Missoula, 1860s. Edwin Bonner and Daniel Welch opened a frontier trading business that grew with western Montana. New partners Richard Eddy and Andrew Hammond joined during the 1870s, and by 1885, the company was known as the Missoula Mercantile. Its large downtown store sold nearly everything, from groceries and furniture to wagons and farm tools. The Merc became more than a shop. 3 floors held counters, offices, display rooms, and crowded storage areas, while freight moved through the basement each day. It dominated local trade for decades, then passed to Allied Stores in 1959. The name changed to the Bon Marché in 1978, and later to Macy's, but much of the old interior remained familiar. Employees also passed down stories of a quiet man among the merchandise. Witnesses described a mustache, a plaid flannel shirt, and work overalls. Staff sometimes called him Walter and believed he belonged to the mercantile's earlier years. He was seen near storage areas, arranging unseen boxes, or standing beneath lights that switched on without help. Number 17. Boulder Hot Springs Hotel. Boulder, 1863. Prospector James E. Riley built a saloon and bathhouse beside naturally heated mineral springs. Miners and ranchers came to soak after hard days in the mountains. Riley enlarged the property in 1881 and began a hotel for 50 guests, but he died of smallpox the next year. New owners completed the building and kept the springs open. The resort grew into the Hotel May during the 1890s. After Butte businessman James A. Murray bought it in 1909, a major 1910 renovation added arches, stucco, fountains, and the California mission style seen today. Presidents, wealthy travelers, and working families later visited. It became the Diamond S Ranch Hotel, before returning to its older name. Its best-known legend concerns Simone, a woman said to have worked at the hotel. Local tradition claims she died after an argument with a mining executive inside a hotel office. Later, owners reported small objects moved from room to room and a stove that turned itself on. They jokingly left Simone a cup of tea, and the strange cooking stopped in the quiet lobby. One former owner also described a woman in a white Victorian blouse and dark skirt moving through the older wing. Number 18. Bannock State Park Gallows. Bannock, 1863. Gold had turned a rough camp on Grasshopper Creek into a town soon chosen as Montana Territory's first capital. Henry Plummer, a former California lawman, was elected sheriff of Bannock and the nearby mining district. Routes to Virginia City were dangerous, and robberies fed rumors that a secret band called the Innocents controlled them after dark. Vigilantes accused Plummer of leading those road agents, though historians still debate the evidence. On January 10, 1864, armed men seized Plummer and his deputies, Buck Stinson and Ned Ray. They received no formal trial. All three were hanged near the Bannock jail, at the place where tradition says Plummer had once prepared a gallows for criminals. The original wooden structure disappeared long ago, and the gallows seen today is a reconstruction. Even the sheriff's guilt remains unsettled. In a 1993 mock trial, a Montana jury divided 6-6, producing no verdict. That uncertainty gives the site its power. Visitors stand where punishment came first, and proof never fully followed. People walking near the jail describe a sudden chill, uneasy silence, or the feeling that someone watches from the hillside. Breezes can move through the timber and buildings in strange ways, but Bannock offers no simple ending. Number 19. Boot Hill Cemetery. Virginia City, January 1864. A low hill west of the new gold town became the resting place for 5 accused road agents. Vigilantes hanged Jack Gallagher, Boone Helm, Frank Parrish, George Clubfoot Lane, and Hayes Lyons on January 14th. Their graves gave the slope its lasting name, Boot Hill, and many townspeople chose another cemetery afterward. Only weeks later, the vigilantes turned against Joseph Jack Slade, a former stage superintendent known for courage when sober and wild destruction when drinking. After repeated trouble in Virginia City, he was seized and hanged in March 1864. A rider raced toward his ranch to warn his wife, Virginia, but the town moved too quickly for her to stop it. Stories say Virginia came thundering into town with a revolver hidden beneath her long skirt, just as her husband died. She had been an expert rider and often raced horses beside him. Later folklore placed her back on the trail, a dark-haired woman galloping through dust, her skirt flying as she tries once again to reach Virginia City before the rope falls. Visitors near Boot Hill sometimes claim to hear hoofbeats crossing the quiet foothills when no horse can now be found. The sound grows passes and fades toward town. 5 road agents lie beneath this hill, but the legend riding past them belongs to the woman who arrived too late. Number 20. Elkhorn Ghost Town, Fraternity Hall. Elkhorn Mountains, 1868. Prospector Peter Wise found silver in a narrow valley northeast of Boulder. Mines later drew workers, families, merchants, and hundreds of mules into the hills. Elkhorn reached its busiest years in the 1880s, with trains, stores, a school, and crowded homes standing close beneath the mine workings. Nearly 1,500 mules labored nearby. In 1893, local fraternal groups built Fraternity Hall as the town's social heart. Meals and meetings filled the first floor, while dancing took place above. Masons, Odd Fellows, and Knights of Pythias gathered there. The hall also welcomed concerts, school programs, boxing matches, traveling shows, and basket socials during long mountain winters. Those happy memories sit beside a sad chapter. Diphtheria struck Elkhorn during the 1880s, closing the school at times and taking many young lives. Children's graves remain in the nearby cemetery. Later, visitors to Fraternity Hall began reporting light footsteps and soft laughter from the upper balcony, even when the wooden building was empty. Silver prices fell, the boom ended, and the railroad removed its Elkhorn line in 1931. Number 21. Marysville Ghost Town. Marysville, 1876. Irish-born miner Thomas Cruise discovered the rich drumlummen vein in the mountains northwest of Helena. Cabins, mills, churches, and saloons soon filled the narrow valley. At its height, several thousand people lived near a mine that produced millions of dollars in gold and made Cruise one of Montana's wealthiest men during the boom. When the strongest ore faded, work slowed, and families drifted away. The railroad stopped running, storefronts emptied, and Marysville became a semi-ghost town rather than a place entirely abandoned. Its 1886 churches and weathered homes still face grassy streets, while the broken mine works remain above town, like reminders of the old rush years. Among those buildings grew the tale of the Lady in Blue. Witnesses describe a woman in a long blue dress walking the hills or crossing a quiet road near dusk. She never speaks or approaches. Some say she waits for a miner who failed to return. Others believe she belonged to a family that left the valley after a death and could not leave in spirit at all. No surviving record gives the woman a certain name, so history stops where folklore begins. Yet Marysville gives the story a fitting home. Wind moves through empty lots, old boards creak, and evening turns the mountains blue. Number 22. Kleinschmidt House. Helena, 1892. Banker and entrepreneur. Theodore H. Kleinschmidt built a grand Queen Anne home for his wife Mary and their 6 children. The Prussian-born businessman had reached Montana during the gold rush years, invested in placer mining, and helped establish Helena's first national bank. His home displayed the success of frontier family. Architect W. E. Norris gave the 3-story residence turrets, patterned shingles, stained glass, and richly carved wood. Yet behind its grand design, it was also a busy family home. Children moved between the broad staircase and attic, while visitors entered rooms meant to show how far Kleinschmidt had traveled from an immigrant's difficult start. Later residents began describing soft footsteps climbing the wooden stairs when no visitor was present. Some heard children playing above them, although the attic stood empty. Local tradition also placed a quiet woman in period clothing near the upper rooms. The figure rarely looked at witnesses and seemed tied to the house rather than eager to frighten them. A large old home naturally settles, and voices can travel strangely through wooden halls. Still, the reports repeat the life the Kleinschmidts once knew. Parents below, children overhead, and footsteps connecting every floor. When the mansion grows still, it can sound less abandoned than occupied, as though the first family has simply gone upstairs for the evening. Number 23. Reader's Alley Old Stone House. Helena, 1870s. Stonemason Lewis Reeder built a narrow row of small brick homes near the edge of Last Chance Gulch in town. Miners and laborers rented the rooms, sometimes paying with gold dust. Fewer than half of the original apartments survive, but Reeder's Alley remains the oldest intact piece of Helena's early working-class neighborhood. The old stone house later became home to George and Laura Duchesnay. Laura was known across Helena as a breeder and healer of canaries, and cages of singing birds crowded the little apartment. During Prohibition, local tradition says canaries placed outside also served as a signal that a fresh hidden shipment of liquor had arrived for trusted customers. Long after Laura and her birds were gone, later occupants and restaurant guests reported hearing delicate chirps inside the walls. The song might begin in an empty room, float toward the ceiling, and stop when someone searched for its source. Unlike many ghost tales, no shadow appeared. Only a bright, impossible chorus seemed to return to the stone rooms. Pipes, sparrows, and echoes offer simple answers, yet the legend fits the place too well to disappear. Reeder's Alley once held miners, families, secret drinks, and dozens of yellow birds. After sunset, the stone keeps every sound close. Then one clear trill may rise from an empty wall. Number 24. Great Falls Central High School. Great Falls, 1896. The city's first main high school opened in a gray sandstone building designed by William White. Its walls were thick, its oak doors heavy, and a tall clock tower rose above 14 classrooms, laboratories, an art room, and an assembly hall. The school later became Paris Gibson Junior High, and finally an art museum in 1977. Thousands of students passed through before classes ended there in 1975. One old tale claimed that a pupil drowned in a swimming pool hidden in the basement. Research later showed there had been no such pool. Student Grant Mill drowned in the Missouri River in 1915. The false detail faded, but reports of strange activity inside the building did not. An art teacher working after class once heard footsteps enter her room. From the corner of her eye, she saw a little boy wearing a striped shirt and told him she would help in a moment. When she turned, the room was empty. Staff have also described rustling papers, faint singing, and steps traveling through hallways after everyone else had gone home that evening. The building's age can explain many sounds, and its school history invites memories to grow into stories. Yet the boy in the striped shirt remains harder to dismiss. He did not rattle a door or hide in darkness. He simply appeared as another student waiting for help. Number 25, the Keep Restaurant and Greenough Mansion. Missoula, 1894. Mining investor Thomas Greenough built a grand Queen Anne mansion near Rattlesnake Creek. Architect A.J. Gibson designed its many rooms, carved wood, painted windows, and formal spaces. The Greenough family later gave nearby land to the city for a park, but the mansion itself stood directly in the path planned for Interstate 90. To save it, the family began an extraordinary move in 1965. The 287-ton house was eventually cut into 3 pieces, carried across the Clark Fork, and rebuilt in the South Hills. It became a restaurant overlooking Missoula. Then, in June 1992, fire destroyed the older mansion. The present castle-like keep opened on that foundation 1 year later. The blaze did not end the folklore. Staff and diners linked a playful presence to Edith Greenough, said to be one of the family's children. Chandeliers reportedly swayed in still rooms, glasses cracked or moved without a clear cause, and toilets flushed when no one was nearby. Some workers also heard soft greetings or felt a quick touch while standing alone. The current building is not the Victorian mansion, and that fact makes the legend stranger. If Edith followed the house, why did the stories remain after the fire? Perhaps tales simply attach themselves to the hill. Yet when dinner ends and a chandelier begins a slow swing above an empty table, the old Greenough home can seem to occupy its foundation once more. Number 26, the Oxford Saloon. Missoula, 1883. According to long tradition, the Oxford opened as a working man's saloon near Higgins Avenue. City records clearly list it by 1907, when railroad crews, loggers, miners, lawyers, and students gathered beneath its smoky lamps. Scores arrived by ticker tape, then went onto a blackboard, while meals and drinks crossed the worn bar nightly. The business moved 1 block north in 1955, but it carried its old name, recipes, and reputation to the corner of Higgins and Pine. Locals still call it the Ox. Modern screens replaced the scoreboard, and spittoons vanished from the footrail, yet the room remains a downtown meeting place where early morning diners sit beside late-night regulars today. Its folklore speaks of 3 well-dressed men in 19th century clothing. Patrons have reported seeing them seated together at a rear table, leaning toward one another as if sharing a private joke. Their mouths seem to move, but no voices rise above the room. A second glance finds only empty chairs, although no one was seen walking away in the dark. The figures have no proven names, and some sightings may be reflections or tired eyes. Still, their calm manners match the Oxford better than a frightening ghost would. When the crowd thins and the older tables stand open, people sometimes look toward the back and imagine 3 former customers returning for one more silent conversation at the Ox. Number 27. Hotel Metlin. Dillon, 1897, businessman and politician Joseph C. Metlin opened a grand hotel beside the railroad tracks, on the site of an earlier hotel lost to fire. Dillon had grown as a ranching center and major rail stop, and the new 3-story building offered 60 rooms, electric lights, call bells, steam heat, and hot and cold running water for visitors. The Metlin quickly became the town's leading social center. Travelers stepped over from the depot, ranchers made deals in the lobby, and local leaders met in its parlors and saloons. A ladies' room offered a quieter space, while men gathered around the ornate bar. Its restaurant, gaming rooms, and dance floor also drew busy crowds well into the night. Guests later began hearing piano music drifting from the empty saloon after the last player had gone. Others reported cigar smoke on the upper floor or caught sight of an old prospector resting in the lobby. He appears comfortable, hat low and hands still, but fades before anyone reaches the old chair. The music always stops when someone enters the saloon. Trains still pass close enough to shake the windows, providing a simple cause for many bumps and rattles. The piano and seated miner are harder to place. When a whistle rolls through Dillon after dark, the Metlin seems to return to its busiest years, and one quiet traveler may still be waiting in the lobby for a train that no longer stops for him, even now. Number 28. Maiwa Building and Museum. Butte, 1899. The Hua Chong Tai Company moved into a new brick mercantile in the heart of Chinatown. Its shelves served miners, cooks, families, and travelers with food, herbs, clothing, and household goods for many years. In 1909, the company hired architect George Desnell to add the adjoining Maiwa building and a noodle parlor upstairs beside China Alley. The new structure held street-level shops, lodging rooms, and a hidden half-floor only about 6 feet high. For decades, the Chin family owned the businesses and also lived inside the two connected buildings. As Butte's Chinese population declined, the shops closed in the 1940s, but furniture, papers, tools, and old unopened goods remained behind. The Maiwa Society began preserving the property in the early 1990s and turned it into a museum of Asian life in the Rocky Mountain West. Visitors sometimes report a sweet trace of incense where none is burning. Others hear low voices from the upper rooms, their musical Cantonese rhythm fading the moment a guide opens the door. No speaker can be found. No record proves who the voices might belong to, and old brick passages can carry street sounds in strange ways. Yet the museum holds more than objects. It protects the remains of a community once pushed to the edge of town history. Number 29. Western Heritage Center. Billings, October 1901. The Parmley Billings Memorial Library opened in a stone building given to the city by the Billings family. It honored Parmley, the eldest son of Frederick and Julia Billings, who died at 25. The tower, arched windows, and reading rooms gave the young railroad town its first permanent public library. Books filled the rooms. By the 1950s, one librarian dreaded trips into the attic, where old newspapers were stored. She described creaking and whirling noises above the reading rooms. The growing city moved its library in 1969, and the building stood empty before the Western Heritage Center opened there in 1971 to preserve Yellowstone Valley history. The attic stayed untouched. Staff later found child-sized footprints along attic walkways and gave the unseen visitor the name Priscilla. She is said to play on the tower steps. Early one morning, workers saw an elderly man seated near the basement fireplace, quietly studying paintings. 2 interns later saw the same figure without knowing that earlier report. The chair was empty. The little girl and old man have no certain place in the written record, but their stories suit a building made for books and memory. After the museum closes each night, the tower stairs seem to hold a lighter step while the basement chair faces its art. The old library may have changed its purpose, yet some visitors seem never to have left after dark. Number 30. Grant Course Ranch. Deer Lodge Valley, 1862. Métis trader and cattleman Johnny Grant built what the National Park Service calls the valley's first good house. It held a trading post below and family rooms above. In 1866, German immigrant Conrad Kors bought the ranch and cattle for $19,200, beginning an empire that reached across millions of acres. Herds filled the valley. Kors survived rustlers, distant markets, and the terrible winter of 1886 to 87, when he lost about 60% of his valley herd. His family expanded the house in 1890, adding a brick wing, formal dining room, large kitchen, and bedrooms. Congress created Grant Course Ranch National Historic Site in 1972, and it opened in 1977. The ranch stayed in use. Rangers have reported doors open after being padlocked, voices inside empty storage buildings, and the sound of cowboys filling a bucket where no grain or workers could be found. One exhausted ranger sat on the house steps and was suddenly surrounded by lavender, the same gentle scent once kept in Augusta Course's dresser. No cowboy could be found there. Visitors also tell of wood smoke, conversation, and a ranch breakfast drifting from rooms where no stove is working. Such smells may ride on wind from Deer Lodge, but together they form a complete morning from another time. Before the gates open, the ranch can seem awake already.
If you enjoy this video, please click the like button.
And don't forget to subscribe to the channel.
See you in the next one.
Number 1. The Slide Rock Bolter. Colorado high country, early 1900s. In logging camps where slopes fell away like broken stairs, workers told newcomers about the Slide Rock Bolter. They said it was a mountain whale, huge as a cabin, hiding above timberline with its hooked tail locked around a ridge. Below, men heard stones crack loose and watched dust rise from ravines without warning. The tale entered print in William T. Cox's 1910 book of fearsome creatures, but it sounded older, like something polished beside campfires. The bolter supposedly waited on grades steeper than 45 degrees, then released its tail and shot downhill, oiling the rock with slippery drool. Trees, cabins, and tourists had no chance at all to flee downhill. Of course, no giant whale ever patrolled Colorado's peaks. The story was a joke with a warning inside it. Miners and timber crews knew rock slides could sweep a canyon clean in seconds, especially after rain, snowmelt, or blasting. Instead of giving a dry safety lecture, they gave the danger teeth, a tail, a name, and a hungry mouth to remember. It makes the mountains feel alive, not evil, just powerful and quick to punish carelessness. When gravel rattles above a trail and the whole slope seems to breathe, you can almost picture that impossible creature letting go one more time from the cliffs above. Number 2. The Legend of Silverheels. Buckskin Joe, Colorado, 1861. The mining camp was loud with picks, poker, and stagecoaches when a young dancer arrived wearing shining shoes. No one agreed on her real name, so the miners called her Silverheels. In a place built on silver dreams, she became the brightest figure in the room, kind, graceful, and remembered by every lonely man there. Then smallpox reached the camp, and joy turned into fear. Many people fled toward safer towns, but stories say Silverheels stayed. She carried water, cleaned sick rooms, and cared for miners too weak to rise from their beds.
I'm right here.
In a rough camp where money usually came first, her courage became worth more than any claim in South Park that winter. The disease finally caught her too, quietly. She survived, but the illness left scars on the face everyone had once praised. When the miners collected money to thank her, she was gone, hidden somewhere in the mountains. They never found her, so the memory moved on to the map. Mount Silverheels rose above South Park, with her name for all to see. People say, a veiled woman sometimes returns with flowers for old graves, as if she never stopped nursing the forgotten. Whether she was one woman or a story shaped by gratitude, Silverheels remains Colorado's quiet reminder that beauty can be an act of mercy in the darkest season of all, even without her true name. Number 3. Charlie Dinnaback at Walrus Ice Cream. Fort Collins, Old Town. Beneath the cheerful counter of Walrus Ice Cream, old rooms and tunnels hold pieces of another business. Before scoops and cones, Charlie Dinnaback ran Dinnaback's Cafe here, greeting customers with the pride of a man who knew half the town. He died in 1940, but the stories say he never fully left the building below, where old brick holds sound. Employees describe Charlie as friendly, not frightening. Faucets turn on when no one is near them. Supplies shift places after closing. A worker might feel a playful tug near the ankle, then turn to find only the humming coolers and the smell of waffle cones. It feels less like a haunting than a prank from a familiar neighbor checking the place. That fits the history people remember. Charlie was a local businessman and booster, the kind of person who made a storefront feel like part of the community. When Walrus Ice Cream opened in the same old town space decades later, the ghost story gave the shop something most businesses cannot buy: a house spirit with manners and a local name. So the legend of Charlie Dinnaback is not about terror in a basement. It is about a town keeping one of its old characters alive through laughter, footsteps, and small surprise. If a faucet runs by itself below walrus ice cream, people do not scream for so long. They smile and wonder if Charlie just wanted a little attention again before closing again. Number 4. The Fur-Bearing Trout. Salida, Colorado, 1938. The Arkansas River was already famous for cold mountain water, but one Depression-era story made it stranger. Newspapers and travelers heard that local trout had grown thick coats of fur to survive the freezing current. The fish, people joked, shed their winter pelts when summer warmed the valley again each year. The fur-bearing trout sounded almost believable if you had ever stepped into snowmelt. The tale said anglers had to comb their catch before cooking it, and that unlucky fishermen sometimes mistook the furry fish for swimming rabbits. It was silly, but it was told with a straight face, which made outsiders lean closer and laugh at the absurd detail of it. Behind the joke was a clever bit of tourism. Local boosters around Salida used the hoax to draw real attention during hard economic years, when towns needed visitors, headlines, and anything cheerful enough to travel by word of mouth. Stuffed examples appeared, stories spread, and Colorado gained one of its funniest scientific wonders for travelers who wanted a smile. That is the charm of the fur-bearing trout. It never needed to be real to do its job. It turned cold water, hard times, and mountain humor into a legend people still repeat. Somewhere along the Arkansas, when the river bites your skin with ice, the story feels possible for one quick second, and that is enough to keep it alive in the cold current. Number 5. The Stanley Hotel. Estes Park, 1909. The Stanley Hotel opened above the valley like a white palace from another world. Freeland Oscar Stanley, known for the Stanley Steamer automobile, had come to Colorado for his health and fell in love with the mountain air. With his wife Flora, he built a grand resort. The hotel had electric lights, fine rooms, music, and views that made guests slow their steps. Flora loved music, and stories say her piano still answers the quiet ballroom after dark. Some hear notes when no player sits at the keys. Others claim F.O. Stanley appears in halls or the billiard room, still checking his beloved hotel with quiet pride. In 1974, writer Stephen King stayed there near the end of the season, when the building felt nearly empty. That lonely visit helped inspire The Shining, but the Stanley's own ghost stories are often gentler than the book it influenced. Guests speak of soft music, children's laughter, helpful spirits, and shadows that seem more curious than cruel to the living. That is why the Stanley Hotel remains one of Colorado's most famous haunted places. Its legend is not only darkness, it is history refusing to check out. When the wind moves across Estes Park and the windows glow at night, the hotel feels awake, as if the Stanleys are still welcoming guests from the other side. Number 6. The Tommyknockers. Colorado mining country, late 1800s, deep under Leadville, Central City, and other boom towns, miners listened as much as they dug. A soft tap in the rock could mean a rich vein nearby, or a warning before the ceiling cracked. Cornish miners had brought an old belief with them from Britain, the small mine spirits called Tommy knockers, known from Cornish tin country. They were described as tiny men, sometimes greenish, wearing little miner clothes and carrying tools of their own. Some workers left bits of food for them, not because they wanted a joke, but because underground life was dangerous. A bad day could begin with one loose timber, one missed sound, or one pocket of bad air in the dark. The Tommyknockers fit perfectly into Colorado's gold and silver rush years. Mines were loud, cold, and full of echoes, so unexplained knocks were easy to hear and hard to forget. Skeptics could blame shifting stone, dripping water, or distant hammering from another crew. Believers said the little miners were helping, teasing, or telling men to leave before the mountain fell. That is exactly why the legend stayed in the shafts long after the boom years faded. It gave miners a way to speak about fear without sounding afraid. When an old tunnel groans or one tap answers from behind the wall, the question still feels alive. Was it only rock settling, or was a Tommy knocker giving one final warning from the dark? Number 7. Baby Doe Tabor. Leadville, Colorado, 1880s, Elizabeth Baby Doe lived a story that felt larger than the mountains. She married Horace Tabor, the famous Silver King and Colorado politician, when Leadville silver made fortunes overnight. The matchless mine on Leadville's Friar Hill had helped build that glittering world, with fine clothing, grand rooms in Denver, and Denver society watching every move. Then the price of silver collapsed after the 1893 repeal of the Sherman Silver Purchase Act. Horace lost his wealth, and when he died in 1899, his last plea became legend. Hold on to the matchless. Baby Doe believed him. She fought creditors, signed papers, borrowed money, and kept returning to Leadville, even as the old bonanza faded. By the 1930s, she was living near the mine in a plain cabin, far from the life people once gossiped about. Historical records show her story was more complex than the poorest versions of the tale, but it still ended in loneliness. In February 1935, at age 81, she died at the Matchless, and her body was not found until March. Lights seem to shift, photographs move, and visitors feel a stubborn presence beside the weathered boards. Maybe it is only wind moving through a mining site, or maybe a woman who lost everything except a promise is still keeping watch over the silver dream that ruined her. Number 8. The Sleeping Giant of Elk Mountain. West of Steamboat Springs, Elk Mountain in Routt County lies across the horizon like a sleeping body. Long before ski lifts and busy streets, the Yampa Valley was home to Ute people, and later to trappers, ranchers, and settlers who learned the shape of the land by sight. The mountain's profile made people imagine a giant resting with his face turned toward the wider Colorado sky. The story says he was a gentle giant who loved the valley and protected its people. He was promised eternal life as long as he never harmed another living thing. But when a cruel ogre threatened the valley, the giant lured him toward quicksand near Steamboat Lake. The people were saved, but the giant had broken his sacred promise. So the valley put him to sleep, not as punishment alone, but as a sorrowful kind of honor. In another version, rattlesnakes were gathered around the mountain to guard him from being disturbed. That detail gave the story a local warning, too. This beautiful place deserved respect, and not every slope should be treated like a playground. Today, the sleeping giant is tied to the famous Yampa Valley curse, the feeling that visitors leave Steamboat but keep wanting to return. Maybe the curse is only mountain air, wide sky, and memory. Still, when sunset settles across Elk Mountain, the giant seems almost ready to breathe. Number 9. Emma Crawford and the Racing Coffin. Manitou Springs, 1889. Emma Crawford arrived hoping the mountain air and cold mineral springs would help her tuberculosis. She was a young concert pianist, a woman with music in her life and little time left. The town, tucked under Pikes Peak, must have felt bright and strange to her, with healing waters, steep roads, and Red Mountain rising above everything like a promise. Emma loved that mountain so much that before she died in 1891, she asked to be buried near its summit. Her fiancé, Wilhelm Hildenbrand, a civil engineer connected with the Pikes Peak Cog Railway, honored the wish. With help from 11 townspeople, he carried her coffin up the 7,200-foot slope and laid her there above Manitou. But mountains change. Years of harsh winters and spring rains weakened the grave site, and in 1929, Emma's coffin came loose and slid down Red Mountain. Children later found pieces of the casket, a nameplate, handles, and a few remains. It was sad, strange, and unforgettable, the kind of event that turned a private wish into a public legend almost overnight. Decades later, Manitou Springs chose to remember Emma, with humor instead of fear. Since 1995, teams have raced coffin-like carts through town each October during the Emma Crawford coffin races. Behind the costumes is a tender story, a woman who wanted to rest on a mountain, a town that never forgot her, and a slope that gave her one last wild ride. Number 10. The Postman of the Cruise Room. Denver, 1891. The Oxford Hotel opened near Union Station, designed by Frank E. Edbrook, just as the city was growing from frontier stop into a polished Western capital. Decades later, its basement bar became the Cruise Room, an Art Deco lounge inspired by the RMS Queen Mary and born the day after Prohibition ended in 1933. Red light, mirrors, carved panels, and old glamour made it feel like a secret below downtown. That is exactly where the postman legend walks in. Stories say a man in an old postal uniform enters the cruise room, sits at the bar, and orders a beer, as if he is still on a dangerous winter route he never finished. The tale places him in the 1930s, when mountain roads could turn deadly with snow and cold. In the legend, he stopped for a drink before carrying Christmas presents west into the hills, but never made it. When bartenders later clear his spot, the beer is said to be untouched, still full, though everyone remembers him drinking it. The cruise room's ghost is sad because he is not trying to scare anyone. He is late, lost, and still faithful to a job that ended long ago. Number 11. The Phantom Train of Marshall Pass. Marshall Pass, 1880s. Denver and Rio Grande pushed narrow-gauge rails over one of Colorado's toughest crossings. The line climbed above 10,000 feet between Salida and Gunnison, where snow, darkness, and steep grades made every trip feel like an argument with the mountain. Engineer Nelson Edwards knew the route, but one winter night changed it. As the story goes, Edwards was guiding his train through the cold pass when a whistle screamed behind him. A black freight train appeared on the same track, smoke pouring from its stack, and its headlamp grew larger by the second. Edwards opened the throttle, trying to outrun what should have been impossible, while the canyon swallowed the sound and rails shook. Just before the crash, the phantom train seemed to leave the track and vanish into the gorge below. No wreck was found. No crew was missing. Yet when Edwards reached the next station, the tale says a frosty message marked his window, warning him never to cross Marshall Pass again. He quit soon after, and the legend stayed with the railroad. The real line was abandoned in the 1950s, but the story still rides the empty grade. Wind moves through old cuts where trains once labored, and the pass feels made for echoes. Maybe Edwards saw steam, moonlight, and fear combine into one terrible shape. Or maybe something still races those rails, always gaining, never arriving, and vanishing before the crash. Number 12. The Cactus Cat. Southwestern Colorado frontier, late 1800s, cowboys, miners, and travelers traded stories about strange noises in the desert after dark. One of the oddest was the cactus cat, a wildcat said to be covered in thorny hair with sharp blades on its front legs and a branching tail like a living cactus. It sounded ridiculous, but that was part of the fun. The tale said the cat slipped through cactus country at night, slicing deep cuts into the plants and letting the juice drip out. Later, when the sap had fermented, it returned to drink until it staggered across the moonlit flats, yowling like a fiddle being scraped with a knife. For lonely men around a fire, that explained every eerie cry beyond the camp. Folklore collectors later placed the cactus cat among America's fearsome critters, those impossible animals born from work camps and frontier humor. The creature was never meant to be a museum specimen. It was a joke with dust on its boots, a way for people to laugh at a hard landscape full of real thorns, real thirst, and real predators. That is why the cactus cat remains such a perfect desert legend. It turns sharp plants, night sounds, and cowboy exaggeration into one prickly little monster. When a cactus bears strange scars, or a cry lifts out of the dark, the mind still reaches for the old answer. Maybe it was only wind, or maybe the cactus cat had been drinking again under the cold stars. Number 13, the Hatchet Lady of Red Rocks. Morrison, Colorado. Before Red Rocks became one of America's most famous amphitheaters, the sandstone formations already felt ancient and watchful. Denver bought the park in the late 1920s, and New Deal workers later shaped the stage and seats by hand. By the time concerts filled the rocks, teenagers gave the shadows a guardian, the Hatchet Lady. The legend says she once lived as a hermit among the caves and red stone, pushed aside as roads, trails, and the venue grew around her. After death, or maybe after memory, changed her into something stranger, she became the park's midnight warning. People said she wore ragged clothing, moved fast, and carried a hatchet to chase anyone breaking rules after dark. Her story fits the place because Red Rocks has always mixed beauty with danger. The cliffs glow warm at sunset, but the same rocks become black walls at night. Young visitors sneaking around after closing could scare themselves with every crunch of gravel. A distant shout, a moving shadow, or a park worker's flashlight could become a ghost with a blade. Still, the Hatchet Lady survives because she feels like Red Rocks itself, taking human shape. She is not a monster hunting families. She is a warning to respect the park when the music ends. When the seats empty and wind slides between ship rock and creation rock, it is easy to imagine her watching from the dark. Number 14, the Side Hill Gouger. Colorado mountain camps, early 1900s. Workers loved explaining the strange marks of the wilderness with animals no scientist had ever seen. One favorite was the Side Hill Gouger, a creature built for steep slopes. It had legs longer on one side than the other, so it could walk comfortably around a mountain, but only in one direction, forever circling the same hill. The joke was simple and clever. If a trail wrapped neatly across a hillside, someone could blame generations of gougers pacing the same route. If a man got dizzy or lost after following a slope too long, the story made him laugh instead of swear. In some versions, left-legged and right-legged gougers could not even travel together without disaster. The Side Hill Gouger belonged to the family of fearsome critters, tall-tale beasts shared by lumberjacks, hunters, and miners across North America. Henry H. Tryon included it in his 1939 collection, giving the absurd animal a place in printed folklore. Like many camp legends, it made hard country feel less lonely by turning geography into comedy. It explains nothing, and somehow explains everything. Odd paths, steep ground, tired feet, and the need for a good laugh at the end of a dangerous day. When a narrow trail cuts sideways across a Colorado hill, you can still picture the little beast moving slowly around the slope, unable to turn back. Number 15, the Columbine Lady of Central City. Central City, Colorado. The old Masonic cemetery sits above a mining town that once rang with gold rush noise. By the late 1800s, fortunes had risen and fallen there, and many young lives ended far from the places where they began. Among the graves is John Edward Cameron, a Canadian-born man who died in 1887 at only 28 years old. His grave became the center of one of Colorado's gentlest mysteries. Visitors say that twice a year, often named as April 5th and November 1st, A woman dressed in black appears among the stones. She wears a heavy veil and moves quietly through the cemetery, carrying columbines or roses. Then she places the flowers near Cameron's grave and disappears into the trees. No record has proven who she was. Some call her a lover. Others think she was a relative, a secret admirer, or only a story born from real flowers found at the grave long after anyone expected them. That uncertainty makes the legend stronger. Central City already has enough rough mining tales. This one feels softer, shaped by loyalty and grief. The Columbine lady is not frightening because she does not chase, shout, or knock on windows. She simply returns year after year to remember someone the world almost forgot. When fog hangs over the cemetery and cold headstones lean in the grass, her story feels like a promise. Even in a boom town built on money, love may be the thing that stays longest. Number 16. The Augarino. Middle Park, Colorado, 1941. Ranchers and ditch riders had a problem no one found funny. Irrigation water vanished from channels, banks caved in, and precious flow slipped away before reaching hayfields. In the Journal of American Folklore, Robert L. Ives recorded the local answer. A dry country monster called the Augarino whispered about with straight faces. The creature was said to be shaped like a giant corkscrew worm, built for boring through earth. It hated wet places, so it drilled holes through dams and irrigation ditches to drain the water out. Some storytellers even claimed its tunnels were lined with silica, smooth and hard, so no wall of dirt could collapse behind it when it escaped below. Like many Colorado tall tales, the Augarino made daily trouble sound magical. A farmer could blame cracked clay, thirsty soil, bad engineering, or burrowing animals. But blaming a sneaky underground beast was easier to remember, and much more fun after a long day of trying to keep water moving across a dry valley where every gallon mattered. That is why the Augarino still belongs to Colorado folklore. It came from a real worry. Water was life, and losing it could ruin a season. Number 17. The Water Boy of the Hotel Jerome. Aspen, Colorado, 1889. The Hotel Jerome opened during the Silver Boom, built by businessman Jerome B. Wheeler as a grand hotel for a mining town that wanted to look rich and permanent. It had electric lights, elegant rooms, and a famous bar. Over time, the town changed, but the Jerome survived crashes, winters, and quiet years when Aspen nearly emptied. The best-known ghost story comes from 1936. According to local legend, a family staying near room 310 had a young son who drowned in the hotel pool. Years later, guests and workers began speaking of a shivering boy wrapped in a towel, standing in the hallway as if he had just climbed out of the water and needed help finding his family. People call him the Water Boy. Some stories say he leaves wet footprints across the floor or a damp patch where he had been standing. A guest turns to help him, and he is gone. The detail that makes the tale linger is not terror, but sadness. The child seems lost, cold, and waiting for someone to notice him before he vanishes again. That is why the Hotel Jerome's haunting feels different from a simple scare. The building holds Aspen's silver boom pride, its Depression-era survival, and the polished ski town glamour that came later. But somewhere in the old halls, the water boy keeps the story small and human. A wet footprint appears, and the past feels close enough to touch before the hallway dries. Number 18. The Spirits of Goldcamp Road Tunnels. West of Colorado Springs, Goldcamp Road follows the old railroad grade that once linked the city with the Cripple Creek mining district. Around 1900, the short line carried ore, supplies, and passengers through narrow mountain tunnels. Later, the route became an automobile road, leaving the dark passages to collect echoes, graffiti, rumors, and stories. The most famous legend says one tunnel collapsed on a school bus full of children, and their spirits never left. Historians have not found records proving such a tragedy happened there, which makes the tale an urban legend. Still, visitors claim they hear laughter in the tunnels, then sudden screams as if the mountain remembers a disaster. Some drivers repeat a ritual, stop inside the tunnel, put the car in neutral, and wait. The story says invisible children push the vehicle to safety, leaving tiny dusty handprints on windows or bumpers. Skeptics point to slope, dust, darkness, and suggestion. But at night, explanation feels weaker when the car seems to move by itself. The real history is railroad labor, mining traffic, rock cuts, and risky mountain travel. The legend adds a sorrowful face to that danger. When headlights strike the tunnel walls and the air turns cold, the road feels less like pavement and more like a memory. Number 19. Rufus of the Royal Hotel. Yampa, Colorado, early 1900s. The Royal Hotel stood on Moffett Avenue with a false front made to impress travelers. Thomas P. Lindsay began building it in 1903, and it served stage passengers, miners, timber crews, railroad workers, ranchers, and local families. In a small mountain town, a hotel could become half shelter, half gossip column, especially in winter. During the flu years around 1918 and 1919, local history says the building was used as a hospital when Yampa needed more beds. That is one root of Rufus's story. Some say he died there from illness. Others claim he was a gambler who met a bad end after cheating at cards. Either way, the name Rufus stuck to the upstairs rooms. Guests connected him most often with rooms 6 and 7. Lights flickered on and off. Toilets flushed with no one nearby. Furniture shifted. Boot steps crossed wooden floors and stopped just behind a person brave enough to turn around. Rufus sounded more mischievous than cruel, like a restless tenant who enjoyed reminding people the old hotel had not forgotten him. The Royal Hotel later burned in January 2015, but Rufus remains part of Yampa's memory. That ending makes the legend feel even stranger because the building that held his footsteps is gone. Maybe stories are what ghosts become when walls disappear. In Yampa, Rufus still walks on through the past, grinning in the hallway no one can enter anymore, still awake. Number 20. The Ghosts of the Brown Palace Hotel. Denver, August 12, 1892. The Brown Palace Hotel opened with sandstone, red granite, iron, and steel, a luxury downtown landmark shaped like a triangle. Henry C. Brown wanted one hotel grand enough for the growing city, and architect Frank E. Edbrook gave it an open atrium that still makes guests look up in awe before they speak, even today. The hotel welcomed presidents, performers, business leaders, and ordinary travelers who wanted to feel part of Denver's rise. With that much history, Ghost Stories found plenty of rooms to enter. One favorite tells of an old railroad ticket manager or conductor appearing near the ticket area, then walking straight through a wall as if the building forgot to stop him. Other stories drift from deeper inside the hotel. Workers have reported a baby crying near the basement or boiler room, even when no child is there. In Ellington's once known as the San Marco Room, people have told of a phantom string quartet dressed formally and playing music after the living guests are gone for the night. What makes the Brown Palace legend powerful is its elegance. The ghosts do not belong to a ruin. They belong to polished brass, carved railings, tea service, and soft hotel carpets. When music seems to rise from an empty room or footsteps cross a quiet hall, Denver's past feels dressed for one more evening, refusing to leave before the final note fades into the marble air. Number 21. The Gumbaroo. Western lumber camps, early 1900s. The Gumbaroo belonged to the strange family of fearsome critters traded around fires after long days with axe and saw. Men described it as a black, bear-like animal with no fur at all, only smooth, rubbery skin. In Colorado timber country, that detail made the tale easy to repeat at night, especially when the woods were quiet. The creature was said to live in burned-over forests and hollow trees where the ground smelled of ash. Bullets bounced off its hide. Knives sprang back. Even falling branches could not hurt it. A hunter who thought he had found an easy target would hear the shot rebound and realize the forest had played a trick on him instead. But every impossible beast needs one weakness. For the Gumbaroo, it was fire. The same creature that could shrug off metal would explode if flames touched its body. That part made the tall tale feel like a warning from men who knew how fast dry timber could burn. One careless spark could turn a camp joke into real disaster in minutes. So the Gumbaroo is funny, but it carries a smoky kind of truth. It came from workers who lived with wild animals, sharp tools, and sudden forest fires. When a distant boom rolled through the trees or a campfire snapped too loudly, someone could grin and say the Gumbaroo finally caught fire again. Number 22. The Ghosts of Cheeseman Park. Denver, 1858. The land now called Cheeseman Park began as Mount Prospect Cemetery, a burial ground set outside the young city. For decades it held pioneers, soldiers, immigrants, poor families, and people whose names were almost lost before Denver grew around them. By the 1890s, the cemetery had become neglected, crowded, and too close to town, a troubling neighbor for a growing city. City leaders wanted a public park, so families were told to remove their dead. Many could not be found, and many graves went unclaimed. Then came the scandal. Undertaker E.P. McGovern was hired to move bodies, but reports accused his crews of breaking remains apart and placing them into small coffins to earn more money per box. Work stopped, but not every grave was cleared. As paths, lawns, and trees replaced cemetery rows, the ground kept its old secret. Over the years, digging projects sometimes uncovered bones and coffin pieces, reminding Denver that the park's beauty rested on unfinished business. That real history gave the ghost stories a place to grow and stay. Today, Cheeseman Park is peaceful in daylight, with joggers, picnics, and wide green space. But at dusk, the story changes. People speak of shadowy figures, cold spot, and shapes moving where old graves once lay. Maybe it is memory, not ghosts. Number 23. The Ghost of Emily at the Avery House. Fort Collins, 1879. Franklin and Sarah Avery built their sandstone home on Mountain Avenue when the town was still finding its shape. Avery was a surveyor, banker, and water leader, the kind of man whose work helped turn a frontier settlement into a lasting community. The house stood elegant, warm, and full of family life near Old Town. Today, the Avery House is a museum, restored with period rooms, a carriage house, and quiet hallways that show visitors what late Victorian life looked like in northern Colorado. But local ghost lore adds another resident, Emily, a young woman said to have died in the 1880s and returned to the home she once knew, moving through rooms that still smelled of age and polished wood. Her story is not as firmly documented as the house itself, which makes the legend feel softer and more mysterious. Visitors have reported sudden cold breezes, the feeling of being watched, or a pale figure lingering near rooms where the air grows still. Emily does not seem angry. She seems almost shy, as if she is passing through memory. The building is not a ruin. It is a preserved home, filled with careful furniture and old family silence. If a chill slips through a room with no open window, people pause instead of run. They wonder if the past has simply brushed by, wearing the name Emily in a house that remembers and listens. Number 24. The Mystery of Snippy the Horse. San Luis Valley, 1967. A horse was found dead near Alamosa, and the story quickly escaped the pasture. Newspapers called her Snippy, though later accounts say her real name was Lady. The body looked strange to witnesses. Parts of the head were damaged. There seemed to be little blood, and odd marks near the site fed a rumor ready for the UFO age. Across America, people were already watching the sky, reading about flying saucers, and wondering what might visit lonely places at night. By October 1967, headlines turned the death into a mystery larger than one ranch. Some blamed extraterrestrials. Others whispered about secret experiments, cults, predators, or chemicals in the field. Investigators offered more ordinary explanations. Mainstream reviews found no solid proof of abnormal causes, and later reporting pointed toward earthly possibilities, including animal activity and even people tampering with the case. But the first image had already entered folklore: a dead horse, a silent valley, and a sky that seemed too wide and empty. That is why Snippy still haunts Colorado legend. It was not only what happened to the horse, it was the feeling that something had happened just beyond understanding. Her preserved skeleton eventually became part of San Luis Valley UFO tourism, turning a sad ranch mystery into a roadside memory. Number 25. Miss Kitty of the Palace Hotel. Cripple Creek, early 1900s. The Palace Hotel stood in a mining town built on sudden gold, gambling rooms, hard luck, and crowded streets. Among its remembered figures was Kitty Chambers, connected with the hotel during the years after 1908. Local history says she died in room 3, but the stories insist she never truly checked out, no matter how many years passed in town. Kitty's legend is not one of screams or slammed doors. She is remembered as a woman of hospitality, the kind of host who noticed small things. Guests say they have seen a female figure in white moving through the halls, sometimes carrying a candle as if making one last evening round. Then she fades before anyone can speak. The most charming part of the story is how domestic it feels. Blankets seem to be adjusted. Beds look tucked in more neatly than guests remember leaving them. A quiet presence passes near a room, not threatening, just busy. In a town famous for boom and bust fortunes, Miss Kitty's ghost seems to guard the gentler art of making strangers feel cared for. That is why she remains one of Cripple Creek's most beloved spirits. The Palace Hotel has changed with time, but the idea of Miss Kitty has stayed warm and human. If a candlelight glow crosses a hallway late at night, visitors do not imagine a monster. They imagine a hostess still working by memory, smoothing the covers before dawn, and never closing her door. Number 26. Father Dyer, the Snowshoe Itinerant. Colorado mining camps, 1860s, John Lewis. Dyer crossed the Rockies when many men came only for gold. Born in 1812, he had worked mines himself before becoming a Methodist circuit rider, so he understood the rough lives waiting in places like Leadville, Breckenridge, Fairplay, and Alma. Miners called him Father Dyer with affection. His famous snowshoes were really long wooden skis, sometimes described as 10 feet long. With them, he crossed Mosquito Pass and other brutal routes through storms that could bury a trail in minutes. He carried sermons, comfort, and U.S. mail because isolated camps needed letters almost as badly as they needed bread and tools. Dyer preached wherever people would listen, saloons, tents, cabins, or open streets. Sometimes miners paid him with gold dust. Sometimes they had nothing. He still went back because funerals, weddings, sickness, and loneliness did not wait for safe weather. In 1885, Colorado's Senate even made him its first chaplain, honoring his hard mountain work. He was a real man who fought snow, distance, hunger, and rough roads to reach people other ministers could not. Number 27. The Hide Behind. Deep in American logging country, late 1800s, men came back to camp with stories of something no one could ever look at directly. They called it the hide behind. It was said to follow workers through thick timber, always slipping behind the nearest trunk the second a man turned his head. You never saw it. That was the point. The creature belonged to the fearsome critters, campfire monsters invented by loggers, trappers, and woodsmen who lived in dangerous forests. A missing worker could mean a fall, a wrong turn, a bear, or a freezing night. But around a fire, someone could lower his voice and say, "The hide behind got him," and everyone understood the fear. The tale also carried rough humor. Some versions said the hide behind hated alcohol, which gave nervous loggers a joking reason to drink. Others claimed it was thin, fast, and strong enough to pull a man away before he could shout. The details changed from camp to camp, but the rules stayed the same. If you looked, it was already hidden. It turns the oldest fear of the woods into a shape, the feeling that something is behind you. When branches snap on a dark trail and the silence seems to move from tree to tree, the legend does its work. You look over your shoulder, see nothing, and somehow that makes it worse than seeing teeth. That empty space is what follows you back to camp after midnight. Number 28. The Spirit of Annabelle at St. Elmo. St. Elmo, Colorado, 1880s. The town began as a high mountain mining camp in Chaffee County, busy with rails, stores, hotels, and people chasing silver and gold. At its height, St. Elmo had thousands nearby. But when mines slowed and rail traffic faded, families left one by one. The Stark family stayed longer than almost anyone. Annabelle Stark grew up tied to the town's final chapter. By 1943, records note that only Annabelle and her brother Tony remained as full-time residents. Their family owned buildings, including business spaces connected with the old telegraph and hotel life. To visitors, she became a strange, lonely guardian of a place most people had abandoned. After Annabelle died in 1960, the legend said she kept protecting St. Elmo. People cleaning or working in old buildings claimed supplies were moved, objects were scattered, and tidy rooms were undone by morning. It sounded less like rage than stubborn ownership, as if she still disliked strangers changing the town she had watched decay. That is why Annabelle's spirit fits St. Elmo so well. The ghost town is not empty in the simple way ruins are empty. It feels paused, with curtains, porches, and dusty windows still waiting. Number 29. The Tall Tale of Uncle Fossil. Fort Collins, early frontier days. Local folklore gave the town a mountain man named Uncle Fossil. He was not remembered like a polished hero, but like the kind of character people invent when a place wants a good laugh. The tale makes him an eccentric trapper roaming northern Colorado before streets, breweries, and college buildings changed the valley. Uncle Fossil wore a beaverskin hat and carried a cane made from a giant elk horn. That alone would have made him hard to forget. But the story added magic. He could supposedly speak with wild animals, understand their moods, and move through the woods as if every fox, bird, and squirrel had already warned him what was ahead. His loyal companion was a pet skunk named Stinky, which tells you the tale was meant to be playful. Fort Collins has serious history, from native homelands to military posts, farming ditches, and town builders. But Uncle Fossil belongs to the lighter shelf of memory. He turns old frontier roughness into something odd, funny, and easy to repeat. It reminds people that folklore is not always about death or terror. Sometimes a town keeps a silly old trapper because he gives the past a friendly face. In the whisper of cottonwoods near the river, you can almost picture him walking by, cane tapping, skunk trotting proudly at his boots. The old joke keeps walking there. Number 30. Mona of Pikes Peak. Pikes Peak Highway, 1932. The road up America's mountain was steep, narrow, and unforgiving, especially near Glen Cove and the high curves where weather could change fast. In local legend, a young woman later called Desperation Mona crashed near mile marker 13, her car plunging far below the roadway into the cold mountain dark. Some versions name her Winona Mona Roberts and say she survived the wreck at first, only to die weeks later under tragic circumstances. The details shift with the storyteller, as ghost stories often do, but the setting stays the same. Dusk on Pikes Peak, a woman at the roadside, frightened, shivering, and begging a driver to stop. The most repeated tale comes from the 1970s. A man reportedly saw her near the road, gave her his jacket, and helped her down the mountain. Then she vanished, leaving behind a clue tied to the old accident. Whether this was memory, prank, or classic vanishing hitchhiker folklore, the story found the perfect road to haunt. Pikes Peak is beautiful, but its cliffs remind every driver to stay careful. When the sky turns purple and headlights sweep across mile marker 13, the legend feels like a warning with a human face.
If you enjoy this video, please click the like button.
And don't forget to subscribe to the channel.
See you in the next one.
At the Landmark Inn in Marquette, a woman in a floral dress stands near the sixth-floor windows. Staff call her the Lilac Lady. She was a librarian, and she fell in love with a sailor, and the sailor went out on Lake Superior and did not come back. She has been at the window ever since. There is a castle in Kalamazoo built in 1895 for a man named Frank Henderson, who died 4 years after moving in, and his wife Mary, who lasted 12 more years before the house lost them both. Guests there have been reporting their presence. These are 30 haunted places in Michigan. Number 1. The Whitney. Detroit, Michigan, 1894. David Whitney Jr.'s mansion rose at Woodward and Canfield like a stone palace. Whitney had made his fortune in lumber, steamships, real estate, and banking, and the house showed it. Its pink granite walls, Tiffany glass, grand staircase, and many rooms announced that Detroit had entered a new age of wealth and confidence. David lived there only a few years before his death in 1900, while Sarah Whitney remained until 1917. Later, the mansion served medical groups before becoming a restaurant. That long change from private home to public landmark gives the haunting room to breathe. People are not just visiting a dining room. They are stepping into someone's old life. The stories are usually harmless. Place settings seem to shift. Cold spots pass through warm rooms, and the old elevator is said to move as if called by a hand no one can see. Some guests feel watched from the stair landings, not in a cruel way, but like the house is checking whether its manners are being respected after dark, when the big rooms grow so quiet. It is not a ruin, and it is not forgotten. It still glows with dinners, glasses, and footsteps, while the old family story stays under the noise. After the last table is cleared, the mansion seems to remember its first owner and the private world he built in stone, polished wood, and glass. Number 2. The Landmark Inn. Marquette, Michigan, 1930. The Hotel Northland opened high above Front Street after years of delays, money troubles, and unfinished plans. Its windows looked toward Lake Superior, where ships came and went through fog and sudden weather. For the Upper Peninsula, the hotel felt grand, a warm place of music, dinners, travelers, and lake stories in a hard mining town. The most famous legend is the Lilac Lady. In the tale, she was a librarian who fell in love with a sailor and waited for him near the 6th floor windows. He never returned from the lake, and her waiting never ended. Guests describe a woman in a floral dress, quiet and sad, appearing near the glass as if still searching the water after dark. Staff have told of strange phone calls from empty rooms, soft perfume in hallways, and a feeling that someone has just stepped away. Nothing in the story needs screaming or shadows to work. It is haunting because it feels human. A woman, a promise, and a lake that could take a person without giving back an answer, even to those who loved him. Today, the Landmark Inn is restored and elegant again, but the old hotel name still seems to echo under the new one. Lake Superior remains outside, huge and cold, the same water the Lilac Lady is said to watch. When night settles over Marquette, those upper windows can feel less like hotel rooms and more like someone still waiting for a ship that never comes. Number 3. White River Light Station. Whitehall, Michigan, 1875. Work began on a new light station where White Lake meets Lake Michigan. Keeper William Robinson helped shape the hilltop and later became the first keeper. The tower and attached home faced wind, ice, and fog, guiding boats toward safe waters, while the Robinson family lived beside the lamp each night. For 47 years, Robinson kept that duty. He raised 13 children there with his wife, Sarah, and watched steamers, fishing boats, and storms pass the shore. By the end, people said the old captain walked with a cane. That small detail became part of the place because visitors still claim they hear a slow tapping through the museum after closing. The legend stays gentle, almost domestic. Some say Sarah also lingers, not as a frightening figure, but as a housekeeper who never quite stopped caring for the rooms. Dust cloths are said to move, small items shift, and quiet corners feel recently touched. It is less like a ghost story and more like a family refusing to leave home by the water. Today, the White River Light Station stands as a museum with its stairs, lens, and lake wind still close around it. The real history is strong enough by itself, yet the stories give it a heartbeat after hours. When the building settles and the waves speak outside, it is easy to imagine Captain Robinson making one more round before sunrise. Number 4. Pointe au Barque Lighthouse, Port Hope, Michigan, 1847. A lighthouse was established at Pointe au Barque to mark the dangerous turn from Lake Huron toward Saginaw Bay. The name meant Point of Little Boats, but the water could be rough and unforgiving. Reefs, storms, and darkness made this shore one of the places sailors needed most, especially before radios or steady charts. Peter Shook became the first keeper, but in 1849 he drowned during a supply trip. His widow, Catherine Shook, took over the light and became Michigan's first female lighthouse keeper. Imagine that burden: children at home, cold lake, wind outside, and a lamp that still had to burn because ships depended on it every night and every season. That history gives the ghost story its quiet strength. Local lore says Catherine is sometimes seen in a white dress near the shore, still watching the water. She is not described as angry. She feels more like a keeper who never fully stepped away from her duty, moving along the edge of the lake as if checking for sails through old fog, just as she once had to do. The present tower dates to 1857, and the grounds still hold the feeling of a working light station. Visitors can study the tower, the keeper's house, and the open horizon, where danger once came without warning. At sunset, Lake Huron turns silver and the wind presses against the land. It is easy to believe Catherine Shook is still there, guarding the point. Number 5. Henderson Castle, Kalamazoo, Michigan, 1895. Henderson Castle was completed on West Main Hill, overlooking the city like a storybook house. Frank Henderson had made his money in the paper business and built the Queen Anne Mansion for his wife, Mary. Sandstone, brick, carved wood, tall rooms, and a ballroom made it one of Kalamazoo's grandest homes in its time, high above town. The Hendersons did not enjoy it for very long. Frank died in 1899, only a few years after the house was finished, and Mary followed in 1907. Over time, the castle changed owners and uses, but the memory of that short family dream stayed in the walls. That is where the haunting begins, not with terror, but with a home that outlived its people. Guests have reported soft footsteps, odd sounds, and a sense that someone moves through the rooms after dark. The friendliest legend belongs to a ghostly dog, said to jump onto beds as if settling in for the night. It turns the castle's ghost story into something warmer, a reminder that not every haunting has to be cruel, cold, or frightening. Today, Henderson Castle operates as a historic inn, where visitors sleep under old ceilings and look down toward old Kalamazoo town. The house still feels proud, but also a little lonely in the evening. When a hallway creaks or a bed shifts with no clear cause, the story feels simple. Perhaps the Hendersons, and even their loyal pet, still know this place as home. Number 6. Mission Point Resort, Mackinac Island, Michigan, 1950s. The east end of the island began changing into a wide campus of stone paths, lawns, and lake views. What is now Mission Point Resort was first built in stages as a conference center. then became Mackinac College in 1966. Students studied there with Lake Huron below the bluff and ferry horns drifting over the water. That college lasted only until 1970, but its short life left one of the island's best-known ghost stories. Visitors speak of Harvey, a former student from those years, who is said to linger around the theater and soundstage. The legend says he was young, heartbroken, and never quite able to leave the place where his story ended. The story still travels. Harvey is not usually described as cruel. Staff and guests say he plays with lights, makes odd sounds in empty rooms, and enjoys small pranks when people are alone in the theater. Another softer tale tells of a little girl named Lucy, heard calling for her parents from balconies or quiet corners, as if lost in a busy summer crowd. The room can feel colder. Today, Mission Point feels bright and peaceful, with bikes rolling past, flowers in the lawn, and the straits shining beyond the windows. That is what makes the stories memorable. The resort does not look like a haunted place. It looks alive. Yet after the crowds fade, the old campus seems to hold voices from a brief chapter that never fully closed. Number 7. Holmdene Manor at Aquinas College. Grand Rapids, Michigan, 1908. Holmdene Manor was built for Edward Lowe and Susan Blodgett Lowe, a family tied to the city's lumber wealth. The English-style home stood with gardens, wide rooms, and a third-floor ballroom made for guests. Long before it became part of Aquinas College, it was a private house meant to impress. It felt grand then. Famous visitors added to its memory. Theodore Roosevelt is said to have stayed there, and the house later passed from family life into the quiet rhythm of a campus building. Students and staff moved through the halls for classes and offices, but the old manor never lost the feeling of a home that had seen private laughter, grief, and secrets. It still felt alive. The haunting told most often is lighthearted. People speak of a young boy who giggles where no child is standing, turns faucets on in empty rooms, and flickers lights like he wants someone to notice him. Footsteps have been heard upstairs, and some say a small face has appeared near an attic window watching the grounds below. People remember it. By day, it is part of a college campus busy with ordinary life. At night, the Tudor walls seem older, the stairways seem longer, and a sudden laugh in an empty hall can make even a brave visitor pause and listen for a child who should not be there. The quiet listens. Number 8. Sul Schwa Point Lighthouse. Gulliver, Michigan, 1895. Sul Schwa Point Lighthouse rose on a lonely reach of the Upper Peninsula, where Lake Michigan could turn rough without mercy. The French name is often translated as only choice, and for early sailors, that made sense. In fog, snow, or darkness, this point could be the safe mark they needed most. Ships trusted it. One of its best-known keepers was Joseph Willie Townsend, who served in the early 1900s and died at the station in 1910. Because the area was remote, the story says his body had to remain there until arrangements could be made. That detail, tied to a working lighthouse far from town, gave the place a legend that still feels close. That detail stayed. Visitors and volunteers often connect the haunting to Townshend. They report the smell of cigar smoke, even when no one is smoking, along with chairs moved, silverware shifted, and doors acting as if a keeper has just passed through. The stories are usually more playful than frightening, as though the captain is still minding his house. Few run from him. Nowadays, the lighthouse stands with its tower, keeper's quarters, and broad lake horizon, looking practical and calm in daylight. But when the wind pushes against the walls and the rooms grow still, the old tales return. A trace of cigar in the air can make visitors wonder if Captain Townshend is still on duty, keeping watch at the only choice. The air keeps time. Number 9. Old Jail Museum. Allegan, Michigan, 1906. The county's new jail was built with two very different lives under one roof. The front section held the sheriff's residence, where a family cooked meals and tried to live normally. Behind it were the cells, including solitary spaces, where locked doors, footsteps, and hard choices shaped each day. It felt divided. The building served until 1963, long enough for many sheriffs, inmates, visitors, and worried relatives to pass through. That mix gives the museum its uneasy feeling now. It was never just a jail, and never just a home. Children could be nearby while prisoners waited behind bars, and ordinary kitchen smells could drift toward the cell block. It did not fade. The best-known stories point to the sheriff's wife. Museum workers and visitors say clothing on mannequins has been changed or adjusted when no one should have touched it. Others sense activity in the kitchen, as if the woman of the house is still checking the room, keeping order, and making sure her household looks proper for company. It feels personal. The old jail museum preserves both sides of that strange arrangement, the family rooms and the cells. In daylight, it feels like a history lesson with keys, bars, and old furniture. But after the tour grows quiet, the building seems to remember every role it once held. A creak from the kitchen can feel like someone still keeping watch. Number 10. Detroit Masonic Temple. Detroit, Michigan, 1920. Construction began on a new Masonic temple large enough to match the city's growing power. Designed by George D. Mason, it rose near Cass Park in Gothic stone, with theaters, lodge rooms, ballrooms, stairways, and long passages. When it was completed in 1926, it felt almost like a city hidden inside a building. The numbers alone make the place feel unreal. The temple holds more than 1,000 rooms, along with stages, meeting halls, and spaces built for ceremonies most visitors would never fully see. Detroit was booming then, and the building carried that confidence upward, floor after floor, until even daylight seemed to get lost in its corridors. The ghost story often names Mason himself, though history says he lived many years after the building opened. That makes the legend more interesting, not less. Staff and visitors still speak of doors opening and closing on their own, footsteps near empty stairwells, and roof doors unlocked again soon after guards swear they had just secured them. Today, the Detroit Masonic Temple is still used for concerts, events, and gatherings, so the old rooms are not silent all the time. But in a building this large, silence always finds a corner. When a locked door moves, or a stairwell echoes with no one in sight, the temple seems to remind Detroit that some places are too big to ever feel completely empty. Number 11. Grand Rapids Public Library. Grand Rapids, Michigan, 1904. The main public library opened inside the Ryerson Building, a gift that gave the city a true house of books. Its marble steps, tall windows, and quiet reading rooms served a growing community. People came for newspapers, children's books, city records, and the comfort of a place where knowledge felt safe. Samuel H. Rank became director that same year and led the library until 1941. Under him, the collection grew from about 60,000 volumes to hundreds of thousands. During World War I, he also served as a wartime librarian, helping bring books to soldiers. His life was tied to order, service, and the steady work of keeping stories within reach. Every shelf seemed to matter to him. That is why the haunting feels so fitting. In the basement, staff have reported seeing a man in a dark green military uniform believed to be Rank, quietly cataloging materials as if his shift never ended. He is not a noisy ghost. He belongs to the shelves, the labels, and the careful silence that librarians guard like a treasure. In the present, the Grand Rapids Public Library is modern, busy, and alive with readers, but the old rooms still carry Rank's long shadow. When the basement grows still and the air turns cool, the story feels less like fear and more like devotion. Some people leave work behind. Others, it seems, keep filing it neatly forever, page after page, after the last lamp goes out. Number 12. Calumet Theater. Calumet, Michigan, 1900. The Calumet Theater opened during the Copper Boom, when the Upper Peninsula was full of miners, money, and big dreams. On March 20th, the curtain rose on a touring Broadway show, and a remote mining town suddenly had one of the finest stages in Michigan. For a while, Calumet felt close to the world. The theater welcomed famous performers, including Sarah Bernhardt, John Philip Sousa, Douglas Fairbanks, Lon Chaney, and Madame Helena Modjeska, the Polish actress remembered for Shakespeare. In a town built on hard work underground, the opera house offered light, music, and elegance above the streets. It became a proud civic treasure for miners and families. The ghost story begins years later, in 1958. During a performance, actress Adisi Lane reportedly forgot her lines, then saw Modjeska in the balcony silently mouthing the words. Since then, people have spoken of cold drafts, music with no player, and the feeling of someone watching from the seats, not to frighten, but to help the show go on. The minds that made the town rich are quiet now, yet the theater remains a place where voices return. When the house lights dim and the balcony sinks into shadow, it is easy to imagine Madame Modjeska waiting there, ready to save one more line again, as if the old stage still knows her voice at night. Number 13. South Haven Lighthouse. South Haven, Michigan, 1872. A light station began guarding the mouth of the Black River where it meets Lake Michigan. The first tower was wooden, and the pier could be brutal in bad weather. Waves crashed over the boards, fog hid the shore, and a keeper had to reach the lamp no matter how hard the lake pushed back. James S. Donahue became keeper in 1874 after serving in the Civil War and losing a leg from his wounds. Many would have doubted him, but Donahue proved steady. He kept the light for decades, walking the pier in storms and darkness. The current steel tower arrived in 1903, and even then his duty continued at the water's edge, night after night. That real courage gives the legend its power. People say Donahue's spirit still watches the red lighthouse, with footsteps heard where no visitor is walking and doors opening on their own. In the story, he is not lost. He is doing the same job he did in life, making sure ships, sailors, and the harbor are not forgotten in the dark. Today, the South Haven Lighthouse stands at the end of the pier, bright against gray water and winter sky. Tourists take photos in summer, but the lake still has its old voice. When wind rattles the catwalk and waves strike the stones, the place seems to remember the one-legged keeper who refused to stop. Some duties simply outlive the body, and his feels near when the long pier disappears beneath cold winter spray. Number 14, Castle Museum. Saginaw, Michigan, 1898. A federal post office opened in a building that looked more like a French castle than a place for mail. Its towers, stonework, and chateau style honored the French heritage of the Saginaw Valley. At a time when lumber, trade, and river traffic shaped the city, the building gave downtown a proud face. As Saginaw grew, the post office became too small. In the 1930s, officials considered tearing it down, but local people fought to save it. Later, in the 1970s, the threat returned. Preservation won again, and the old post office became the Castle Museum of Saginaw County history, a place built to hold memory instead of mail. The haunting is quiet, like the building itself after visitors leave. Stories tell of a gray lady moving through the basement and the archives room, where old records and local stories are kept. She is usually described as silent, a pale shape passing between storage areas, as if searching for one file, one name, or one piece of history still missing. Today, the Castle Museum teaches Saginaw's past through exhibits, photographs, and artifacts, but its own walls may be the strongest exhibit. The city saved the building twice, and maybe that is why the legend fits. In a castle made for public duty, the Gray Lady feels like another keeper of records, walking softly where the past refuses to sleep, still counting names, while the old walls hold their breath. Number 15, The Vintage Tavern. Port Huron, Michigan. Downtown sits near the blue water of the St. Clair River, where trains, ships, shops, and travelers once crossed paths. The Vintage Tavern occupies a restored turn-of-the-century building with brick, wood, and rooftop views toward Canada. Even before dinner is served, the place carries the feeling of old business. Its best-known legend lives below the dining rooms. Staff stories describe two friendly spirits in the basement, dressed like railroad workers from another age, with suspenders and old-fashioned top hats. They are not known for terror. They seem more like men who stayed near the work routes and river town they once understood after the trains went quiet. One detail makes the story feel almost touchable. During work on the building, an authentic top hat dated 1890 was reportedly found hidden in the ceiling. Today, it is displayed in the dining room, a small object that turns rumor into something you can look at. Maybe it belonged to no ghost at all, but it still gives the legend a strange weight. Now the vintage tavern feels polished and lively, filled with voices, glasses, and warm light. But downstairs, away from the rooftop view, the older mood returns. A sound in the basement can feel like a worker stepping from the past, still dressed for the tracks, still attached to the town, and still unwilling to leave his hat behind when the basement grows quiet again. Number 16. Amway Grand Plaza Hotel, Grand Rapids, Michigan, 1913. The Pantland Hotel opened during a bold age for the city. Furniture makers, business leaders, and travelers needed a grand place to stay, and the hotel gave them marble, columns, gold leaf, and a lobby that felt almost too elegant for a Midwestern river town. It was built to impress, and people noticed. For decades, the Pantland welcomed guests through wars, celebrations, and slow changes downtown. By the late 1900s, the old hotel was revived as the Amway Grand Plaza, with a tall glass tower beside the historic rooms. That mix of past and present gives the building its strange charm. Polished service on top, older memories underneath. The ghost stories here are not harsh. Guests and workers speak of playful spirits who seem more festive than frightening. Rooms feel freshly cleaned when no one admits doing the work. Music, movement, and dancing have been reported in quiet halls, as if some party from the old hotel keeps starting after midnight, just out of sight. Some guests laugh it off, others listen harder, still there. Today, the Amway Grand Plaza still glows over Grand Rapids, busy with weddings, meetings, and travelers who may never know its older name. But in the historic spaces, the Pantland still breathes. When a hallway goes silent and a door shifts softly, it feels like the Grand Hotel is remembering every guest who never really checked out, still smiling. Number 17. Belding Library, Belding, Michigan, 1917. Alva Inn. Belding gave his town a permanent library in memory of his parents, Hiram and Mary. The family name was tied to the silk industry that helped build the town, and the limestone library rose near the flat river as a proud public gift. The building opened in 1918, after the city's first small public library had begun in City Hall. Later, when the silk mills faded and the Depression changed daily life, the library stayed useful. People came for books, warmth, quiet, and a sense that the town still had something steady to hold on to in hard years, when a quiet room could feel like shelter. That steady place also gathered a tender legend. Witnesses have reported hearing a little girl giggling in the children's section, even when no child is there. Some say they have seen her small figure near the books, playing happily in a corner before vanishing. The story feels innocent, but it still makes the room go still. No one knows her name. The Alva N. Belding Memorial Library remains a historic landmark, named a Michigan Historic Site in 1980 and placed on the National Register in 1993. The old chandelier, reading rooms, and shelves carry the feeling of a town that once built its future in thread and books. When soft laughter slips through the children's area, it feels as if one young reader never left. Number 18. Sturgeon Point Lighthouse. Harrisville, Michigan, 1869. Sturgeon Point Lighthouse was built to warn ships away from a dangerous reef stretching into Lake Huron. By the spring of 1870, its lamp was guiding sailors along a shore known for sudden storms, heavy fog, and water that could turn from calm to violent before a crew had time to react. The tower rose about 70 feet beside the keeper's house, and the light became a steady mark for vessels moving up and down the lake. Before modern navigation, that beam mattered. A missed signal could mean wreckage, lost cargo, and families waiting in port for men who did not come home. Even its lens was built to carry hope far across black water. The legend here is gentle and practical. People say a ghostly keeper still climbs the tower stairs at night, carrying a dim, flickering light. He is not said to chase anyone or shout from the dark. He only seems to do the work a keeper once did, making sure the beacon stays alive for sailors passing beyond the shore. In that way, the haunting sounds almost like a promise kept in the dark. Nowadays, the lighthouse is still a landmark, with the keeper's house serving as a maritime museum and the lake stretching wide behind it. The white tower and red trim look bright in daylight, almost cheerful, but when evening settles and a small glow seems to move near the stairs, Sturgeon Point feels like a place where duty never ended, only changed hands. Number 19. Detroit Yacht Club. Detroit, Michigan, 1868. The Detroit Yacht Club was organized when the river was central to the city's life. Regattas, steamers, and working boats moved across the water, and the club gave Detroit's boating world a formal home. As the city grew into an industrial giant, the club grew with it, season by season. The current clubhouse on Belle Isle was completed in the early 1920s, designed by George D. Mason in a Mediterranean style. Its bright walls, arched details, and river views made it one of Detroit's most recognizable private landmarks. Inside, the building held dining rooms, social spaces, athletic areas, and quiet corners above the water. It felt almost like a river palace hidden beside the city, bright and proud. The third floor is where the playful legend gathers. Hidden historical racquetball courts are said to belong to the ghost of a young boy, a spirit who startles workers and visitors who wander too far into his space. The story feels less like a warning and more like a child claiming a secret playground inside a very grown-up building. Most visitors see elegance, history, and old Detroit confidence. But upstairs, where old courts sit away from the main rooms, a sudden sound can turn the clubhouse into something stranger, a place where one boy may still be playing.
Kept you waiting long.
Number 20. Hickory Creek. Buchanan, Michigan. Hickory Creek winds through a quiet part of southwest Michigan, the kind of place where winter once turned water into a neighborhood playground. Children skated until the light faded, and parents needed a way to call them home before the ice, the dark, or the cold became dangerous. In small towns, that kind of tale can travel for decades without a book or a sign, moving porch to porch now. That is where the phantom skater entered local folklore. Parents warned that if children stayed out too late, a towering figure in black tights and a skull cap would come racing over the creek. His skate blades flashed green sparks and blue flames, and he moved fast enough to make even the bravest child think twice. One local version says Harvey Seasongood later claimed he saw the skater himself, a huge shape leaping near a bridge with a terrible laugh. Whether it began as a true sighting, a curfew tale, or a winter prank, the story worked. It turned a simple rule into something unforgettable. Come home before the creek belongs to someone else. This haunting belongs to backyards, cold fingers, and children hearing the last warning from a porch. When ice forms and dusk settles low over Buchanan, the phantom skater still feels close, cutting sparks through the dark so the young ones hurry home. Number 21. Traverse City State Hospital. Traverse City, Michigan, 1885. The Northern Michigan Asylum opened on a hill above town, built in the Kirkbride style with long wings, fresh air, and sunlight. Its first superintendent, Dr. James Decker Munson, believed in beauty is therapy. Patients saw flowers, trees, and open lawns, not just walls. The setting was part of the cure, every day. The hospital became one of the city's largest employers and grew into a self-sufficient world. Farms, greenhouses, workshops, and kitchens kept it running. For many patients, work and calm surroundings were part of treatment. Still, it was a place of illness, separation, and lives that often disappeared from ordinary memory behind quiet doors for years. Today, the property is the Village at Grand Traverse Commons, with shops, homes, restaurants, and walking paths. But some old sections and brick steam tunnels still carry a different mood. Tour visitors have reported flickering lights, soft voices, and footsteps in places where no one should be walking, especially below ground after the group pauses. It was not simply a dark place, and it should not be treated like one. It was a real institution filled with real people, hope, pain, work, and silence. When the tunnels echo under the restored buildings, it feels less like a jump scare and more like history, asking not to be forgotten, one brick at a time now. Number 22. Fort Mackinac. Mackinac Island, Michigan, 1780. British soldiers moved their fort from the mainland to the high limestone bluff above the Straits of Mackinac. From there, cannons watched the water where Lake Michigan and Lake Huron meet. Fort Mackinac soon became a military post, trading center, and symbol of control in a wild border region high above the harbor. The fort changed hands with the young United States in 1796, then was captured by the British again in 1812 during the first land action of the War of 1812 in the region. Americans tried to retake it in 1814 and failed. After the war, the fort returned to American hands, and soldiers stayed for generations, drilling on the parade ground, through cold seasons. The hauntings seem to rise from all that duty. Visitors and staff have reported fife music with no musicians, phantom rifle shots, and footsteps near old barracks. The gentlest story belongs to the officers' stone quarters, often called Michigan's oldest surviving building, where children are said to play at night and leave toys behind before morning. Today, Fort Mackinac is preserved with whitewashed buildings, parade grounds, and lake views so beautiful they almost soften its hard history. But after the crowds leave, the bluff feels older again. A toy out of place, a far-off drum, or a sharp crack in the air. Number 23. Old Presque Isle Lighthouse. Presque Isle, Michigan, 1840. The first lighthouse rose on Lake Huron to guide sailors around a dangerous curve of rocky shore. The old tower was short and simple, but in that time a small light could mean the difference between safe water and a wreck. For ships moving through fog and darkness, it mattered more than comfort to every crew passing by. Years later, the old lighthouse became a museum, and one of its most loved caretakers was George Paris. He and his wife helped welcome visitors and care for the place. After George died, the story changed. People began saying the light sometimes came on by itself, even after the tower was no longer supposed to work, almost like a greeting after dusk. The friendliest reports involve children. Some young visitors have claimed they met a kind older man in the tower who told jokes or riddles. Adults may question it, but children often tell the story plainly, without trying to decorate it at all. Now the old Presque Isle Lighthouse stands beside trees, water, and quiet paths, no longer the main working light on that shore. Still, the legend gives it warmth. Not every ghost story needs anger or fear. Number 24. River Raisin National Battlefield Park. Monroe, Michigan, January 1813. American troops and Kentucky militia fought near the River Raisin in the old settlement of Frenchtown. The War of 1812 had already turned the Michigan Territory into dangerous ground. In bitter winter weather, soldiers faced British forces and native allies in a battle that became one of America's worst defeats of the war. The fighting on January 18th brought a short American victory, but the second battle on January 22nd ended in disaster. Many men were killed, wounded, or captured. Because the history is so heavy, the ghost stories are usually told with care. Visitors have claimed to see figures in early 1800s, military dress crossing the fields or standing near the trails. Others speak of distant battle sounds, as if the land replays gunfire, shouts, and marching feet when the park grows quiet under the trees near evening. Today, River Raisin National Battlefield Park is not just a haunted place. It is a place of memory, where real lives ended and later generations tried to understand what happened there. The grass may look peaceful now, but the ground holds a national wound. At dusk, the silence can feel less empty than waiting, as if old footsteps have only stopped for a moment. Number 25. Morton House Museum. Benton Harbor, Michigan, 1849. The Morton House was built by Eliezer Morton and his son Henry, whose family helped shape the young community. The house later became tied to Benton Harbor's growth, its shipping canal, its lake trade, and the people who believed this corner of southwest Michigan could become a real port city, busy with boats. 4 generations of the Morton family lived there, and the home changed with them. Henry's son, Stanley Morton, helped the local steamboat industry grow, connecting Benton Harbor with Chicago across Lake Michigan. By the time the house became a museum, it had already watched the town rise, struggle, and rebuild itself through changing years. The haunting is often described as busy rather than frightening. Stories speak of 2 Swedish sisters lingering near the kitchen, as if still drawn to the most active room in the house. Others report music from an old, out-of-tune piano with keys pressed by hands no one can see, turning silence into a thin, uneven song after hours when the tour has ended. Today, the Morton House Museum is known as the oldest building in Benton Harbor, and its rooms hold photographs, furniture, and local memory. The ghosts, if they are there, do not feel like strangers. They feel like residents of a house that became a town story, still moving softly through the kitchen and touching one last note on the piano before the room grows still. Number 26, Michigan State Capitol. Lansing, Michigan, late 1878. The new state capitol was complete after years of work, giving Michigan a grand home for its government. Its cast iron dome, painted details, and wide rotunda were meant to show confidence after the Civil War years. Lawmakers, visitors, and school groups would later pass beneath that high ceiling, looking up in wonder at every detail. The building was restored carefully in the late 1900s, bringing back colors, patterns, and decorations that had been hidden or worn down by time. But one older story stayed in the air. Local legend says a painter died while working high in the rotunda, and that his spirit never fully left the place where his final job remained unfinished. People who tell the story describe a man in old work clothes, glimpsed near upper levels, or felt in a sudden cold breeze. Sometimes the chill moves through a hallway where the air had been still a moment before. It is not a loud haunting. It feels like a worker checking paint, plaster, and light from a height most visitors never reach. Today, the Michigan State Capitol still serves the public, full of tours, debates, offices, and echoing footsteps. Yet after the busy day fades, the rotunda can feel enormous and quiet. If a cold breath crosses the floor, it is easy to imagine the old painter still above, careful with one last stroke, keeping watch over the dome he never stopped seeing still, even now. Number 27, Beatgrise Beach. Keweenaw Peninsula, Michigan. Beatgrise Beach rests along Lake Superior, far from the busy roads and bright towns farther south. Its name is French for gray beast, a strange title for a place that can look so calm. The shoreline is pale, open, and quiet, with cold water stretching so wide it feels more like an inland sea than a lake on still mornings. The beach is famous for its singing sands. Press your palm into the dry white sand and move it just right, and the grains can make a squeaking, singing, or barking sound. Science points to the shape, dryness, and cleanliness of the sand grains, but folklore gives the sound a heart, turning the shore into a voice older than any sign. In the legend, a young native woman lost the man she loved to Lake Superior. She returned to the shore again and again, calling across the water for him. The sand remembered her sorrow, and when people press it, the beach sings back. It is not a ghost that appears in a hallway. It is grief carried by the ground itself, soft and strange. Today, Beat Grease remains one of Michigan's most unusual haunted places. The lake rolls in, the wind passes over the dunes, and the sand answers with a small, lonely cry. Whether it is science, story, or both, the sound makes the beach feel alive with someone still calling from the edge of the world. Number 28, Holly Hotel. Holly, Michigan, 1891. John Hurst opened the Hurst Hotel on Battle Alley, close to the railroad line that brought travelers through town. Holly was a busy stop then, with trains, merchants, meals, and guests moving in and out. The hotel was built to be impressive, with fine dining rooms and the comfort people wanted after a long ride in winter. In 1912, Joseph P. Allen bought the building and renamed it the Holly Hotel. About a year later, fire damaged the upper floor, and the hotel had to be repaired and changed. More fires, ownership changes, and hard years followed, yet the building kept returning, almost stubbornly, as if the town was not ready to lose one of its old gathering places. The ghost stories fit that long survival. John Hurst is often named as the strongest presence, linked to cigar smoke, laughter, and a figure seen during quiet moments at night. Others speak of a child's footsteps, voices without bodies, and glasses or objects moving in the dining rooms after staff have already set them right. It feels more playful than cruel. Today, the Holly Hotel is a restaurant filled with conversation, meals, and the glow of a historic room still doing its job. But the past does not feel so far away. When a glass shifts or cigar smoke drifts where no one is smoking, the old Hearst Hotel seems to rise behind the modern name, welcoming guests who may not be the only ones at the table. Number 29, Ramsdell Theater. Manistee, Michigan, 1903. The Ramsdell Theater opened after local lawyer, leader, and philanthropist Thomas Jefferson Ramsdell poured his money into a stage for the town. Architect Solon Spencer Beeman designed the theater and grand ballroom, giving Manistee a cultural landmark on Maple Street, when lake commerce and lumber wealth still shaped the city. Opening night brought the musical comedy A Chinese Honeymoon, and the seats filled with people who wanted to see what Ramsdell had built. Some had called the expensive project foolish, but the theater survived those doubts.
It was you who told them.
One of those young performers was James Earl Jones, who had deep roots in Manistee County and began his stage life at the Ramsdell. That history gives the ghost stories extra weight. Visitors have reported T.J. Ramsdell watching from the upper balcony, while windows close by themselves and lights turn back on after workers believe the building is empty. The Ramsdale Theater still serves the arts, with its old seats, stage, and balcony, holding more than a century of applause. The haunting feels like devotion to the room, not danger. When the last light fades, it is easy to imagine Ramsdale above the stage, checking his grand gamble one more time, proud that the curtain still rises. Number 30. Historic Fort Wayne. Detroit, Michigan, 1845. Work began on a new star-shaped fort along the Detroit River, at a point facing Canada. The United States wanted a strong defense after the War of 1812 had shown how important this border could be. Named for General Anthony Wayne, the fort was completed in 1851 with heavy stone walls and careful defensive angles. By then, relations with Britain had cooled, and Fort Wayne never fired a shot in battle. Instead, it became something just as important, a military post where soldiers gathered, trained, and passed through. During the Civil War, Michigan volunteers mustered there before leaving home. Later, the fort served troops in other conflicts as the city changed around it for years. That long service gives the ghost stories their quiet march. Visitors have reported footsteps in empty barracks, shadows near the catwalks, and figures that seem to patrol the grounds after dark. They are often described as soldiers still keeping order, as if the fort's old routines continue even when no roll call is being taken. Detroit's skyline feels close, but the grounds can seem far from modern noise.
If you enjoy this video, please click the like button.
And don't forget to subscribe to the channel.
See you in the next one.